Welcome everyone to the April 11th, 2024 Enforcement and Compounding Committee meeting. My name is Maria Serpa, Chairperson of the committee. Before we convene, I'd like to remind everyone present that the board is a consumer protection agency charged with administering and enforcing pharmacy law. Where protection of the public is inconsistent with the interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. As I facilitate this meeting, I will announce when we are accepting public comment. I have advised the meeting moderator to allot 3 minutes for each individual providing comments. Throughout the meeting, at appropriate times, we will begin with public comments with individuals attending in public in Sacramento, followed by individuals participating via WebEx. Currently at this time, are there any people in Sacramento for the public? I think we will be advised if there are people in the Sacramento location. This approach is necessary to facilitate this meeting. Before we get started, I'd like to ask staff moderating the meeting to provide general instructions on the process for providing public comment via WebEx. David?
Good morning. When the time comes for public comment, we will ask everyone to raise a hand virtually by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users will need to dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. For our mobile device users, you have 3 different pages and only one of them has a hand button, so you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... at the bottom of your screen, in order to find the page with the hand button. And we also have a Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen where you can type the word comment if you wish to make a comment, and we will address those as well. As stated before, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 10-second warning before your time expires. Madam Chair?
Thank you. Let's now start with a roll call to establish a quorum. Renee Barker.
Licensee member present.
Good morning. Indira Cameron Banks.
Good morning, public member present.
Sung Oh.
Good morning, licensed member present.
Nicole Tebow.
Good morning, licensee member present.
Good morning. A quorum has been established. I ask everyone participating today to be respectful of the work before the committee. We encourage participation by members of the public throughout the meeting at appropriate times. The committee respectfully requests that when comments are provided, they are done so in a professional manner consistent with how the committee conducts its business. Finally, before we move on to the next agenda item, I'd like to remind committee members present and participating via WebEx to remain visible with your cameras on throughout the open portion of the meeting today. If you need to temporarily turn off your camera due to challenges with internet connectivity, please announce the reason of your non-appearance when you turn off the camera. Thank you. Our next agenda item is public comment for items not on the agenda, items for future meetings. I will now ask the moderator to open the lines for individuals to provide an opportunity for public comment. If you are not required to identify yourself, but may do so. I'd like to remind everyone that the committee cannot take action on the items except to decide whether to place an item on a future agenda. Members, following the public comment for this agenda item, I will ask you to comment on what, if any, items should be placed on a future agenda. As a reminder, this agenda item is not intended to be a discussion, but rather an opportunity for members of the committee and members of the public to request consideration of an item for future placement on an agenda, at which time discussion will occur. Are there any members of the public in Sacramento? Can you hear us in Sacramento?
No comments here.
Okay. Anne, can you let us know if members of the public come, and we will continue to ask for comment there. Until then, I probably will skip you if that's okay.
Yeah, please do. I will let you know if someone approaches the table.
If someone's in the room.
So there is someone present in the room. But,
okay, so I'll ask at every moment, at every opportunity. Okay. Great, thank you. Moderator, we're ready for public comment for individuals participating via WebEx.
All right, now is the time to raise those hands. Please tap the hand button at the bottom of your screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And for our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that ... in order to find your hand button. And our first comment comes from Stephen Gray in the Q&A box. Hold on just a moment, Stephen. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Good morning, board members and audience. I'd like to request on a future agenda clarification of who can distribute to nurse practitioners prescription drugs. As you know, in 2023, it became possible for certain nurse practitioners to be eligible to practice independent of physicians. In the past, nurse practitioners who practiced with a physician supervision had to use the prescription drugs that were distributed and issued by manufacturers, wholesalers, and pharmacies to that physician. Now, without the necessity of having a physician supervisor, it is unclear under the law whether nurse practitioners in that category can order and receive drugs from prescription drugs from manufacturers, nurse practitioners, or pharmacies. And I think this needs to be clarified. I point out that sections 4059 and 4059.5 of the Business and Professions Code do not list nurse practitioners, or by that means physician assistants, do not list those as licensed individuals that can order and receive prescription drugs and prescription devices. So would you please put this on for clarification, because certain nurse practitioners believe that they can order these drugs from wholesalers, manufacturers, and from local pharmacies, just as though they were a physician. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we're going to hear from Pat Irving, followed by Joe Gracella. Hold on, Pat. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, yes, my name is Pat Irving. I'm an RN and a patient advocate for chronic pain patients. We have noticed lately that thousands and thousands of chronic pain patients have been unable to get their medication due to the opioid settlement injunction, specifically to thresholds. What they're finding is even when they have a valid prescription, when they go to the pharmacies are limited now by the wholesalers. And this is causing undue trauma to these patients that certainly don't need that. It's also a cascade effect. And when they can't find their medication, then they have to drive even further, which then puts them in the category of red flags. I would very much like your board to look into how this injunction is impacting patients, i.e. consumers in California. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and potentially our last request for comment, Joe Gracella. Please let me know if I mispronounce your name.
My question is that the compounding regulations were changed quite a while ago, but I don't think they've been put into law as of yet. Can you comment on when this will be done? And my other question is a lot of people are using webinars now. Are we able to get CME for these meetings?
Thank you.
And we're going to take a last look around to see if we have any additional comments. I believe comments are complete.
Thank you. Before I bring this back to members, I'd like to remind everyone that these items are not for discussion, and occasionally we do get questions instead of comments, and that members of the public can call the board via the Ask the Inspector line to get their questions answered instead of during a committee meeting. It's not that we can't, that we won't answer, we just can't. And also to note that one of the comments was made at a previous meeting regarding thresholds, and particularly in light of closing pharmacies and how that affects pharmacy thresholds, and that will be on a future agenda. Members, with that, do you have any items you'd like to place on a future agenda?
Hi, Chair Serpa. I would like to have more understanding. I've been hoping to kind of ponder if it's even worth our time to ponder about, but I would like to have clearer understanding of prescriber dispensing in terms of mid-level practitioners. I think that that would be something that I would just like to have more understanding of. What's the clear understanding of what are they allowed to do and what are they not allowed to do, when a pharmacist should be really there to determine the dispensing of the products, because as you know, there is a proliferation of mid-level practitioners run med spas, and that I think are putting a lot of patients at risk. I know it's controversial. I know that it's going to touch on a lot of people, but I do hope that we can at least have understanding of what we believe is the right way of doing things versus not so kosher way of running these very rampant business practices that are out there. And I personally, as a consumer, don't know what is allowed and what is not allowed, it feels like. And I don't even know if patient comes and asks, I don't know what to tell. I just, tell them to watch out, be careful. But as you know, there's just so many out there. Also with GLP-1, Botox, there's all kinds of things that goes on out there. I just would like to have better understanding.
Great, thank you. Before I comment, members, do you have any other comments?
This is Renee. Yeah, I would also agree with President O that I think in this comment from Stephen Gray about who can distribute. I mean, this one was a specific category of licensing, but in general, I think we do have on our agenda this discussion about med spas, and there's others, and they're clearly getting prescription products to compound with. So just who has the ability to order is probably a good place to start. So I would be interested in that also.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Chair Serpa, it's Nicole. I think you said already that this is going to be on a future agenda, but definitely want to follow up about the DEA changes and those rules. There's been a lot of unintended consequences. Obviously, what we're hearing happening with chronic pain patients, but I've heard of people running into trouble with things like testosterone at transgender clinics, which it is not, I think, the intention of what this started with, but it's causing a lot of problems in a lot of different realms. So definitely want to explore that.
Great, thank you. So I'm hearing that we will have these two items on a future agenda. And I appreciate President O expanding the scope of the request for the first one. I think we should look at prescriber ordering, furnishing, and dispensing as a general topic, so we can learn a little bit more about that. I think that would be great for a future agenda. Members, do you agree with that? That sounds good. Okay, let's move on to the next. Great, thank you. Let's move on to the next agenda item, approval of draft minutes from the January 23rd, 2024 committee meeting. Attachment 1 includes a copy of the draft minutes from the meeting. Members, do you have any questions or comments on the draft minutes? I would also before we entertain a motion, I do have a change or a request for a change. Didn't pull it out here, sorry. On page 15, I would suggest the change of from my comments regarding Dr. Sherpa clarified that we clarify that to be ISMP Canada. ISMP is a separate and distinct organization from ISMP Canada. And my comments were today, her comments or presentations today from ISMP Canada and IRQ were to provide background information from national programs to the committee. So adding from national programs also. So with that change, I would entertain additional comments or a motion.
Chair Sherpa, motion to approve. This is Song.
With that change?
Of course.
Okay, thank you, Sung.
This
And
is Renee. I'll second that.
great, thank you. With a motion and second on the floor, now open for public comment for the draft minutes. Are there any comments in Sacramento? I can't see people in Sacramento. Are there any comments in Sacramento?
No comments in Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you. We're ready for public comment via WebEx.
All right. Please raise a hand if you'd like to make a comment on the minutes or the motion. Tap that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, thank you. I'll now take a roll call vote since we have no comments. Renee Barker,
Yes.
Indira Cameron Banks,
Yes.
Sung Oh,
Yes.
Nicole Tebow,
Yes.
and I vote yes, motion passes. Thank you. Next agenda item, number 4, presentation by the National Association of State Boards of Pharmacy on drug shortages, including discussion on the national landscape. Members, as you may recall, the board received a request during the public comment for items not on the agenda for us to agendize discussion on drug shortages. The matter was referred to our committee for discussion. I'm pleased to welcome Andrew Funk, PharmD, Member Relations and Government Affairs Director with the National Association of State Boards of Pharmacy. And I see he is here. Thank you for coming today. The floor is yours for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Executive Officer Sodergren, for inviting NABP to present on this very important and timely matter. As mentioned, my name is Andrew Funk. I'm with NABP in the Member Relations and Government Affairs organization there, and previously the Executive Director of the Iowa Board of Pharmacy for a number of years there. So go ahead and advance the slide if you wouldn't mind. Just as a reminder here who NABP is. We are the independent, international and impartial association that is tasked with assisting member boards in protecting the public health. And we do that through supportive measures, namely our competency assessment and the examinations that we provide, but also through accreditation and inspection, and of course, just providing any and all support to the boards as appropriate and as necessary. Next slide, please. Just really quickly here as well, member boards, we have all 50 states, District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, and Virgin Islands. We also have 10 associate members, Bahamas, and 10 Canadian provinces. Next slide. So jumping in a little bit here on the drug shortages, and kind of what I intend to visit today about is very high level, a little bit of history on drug shortages, some of the work that's been done by FDA as well as DEA to help alleviate some of these issues that we're seeing across the country relative to the drug shortages, whether it's injectable drugs or solid dosage forms, and how those shortages have come about, as well as some of the reasons behind why, and hopefully some of the things that are being done to help alleviate some of those shortages as time goes on. And of course, what NAP has been doing and is doing and plans to do to help assist in this issue. So the slide here, I think one thing to note, most of the prescription drugs that are dispensed at retail and utilized in health systems, most of those are, of course, dispensed as generics. And as we've seen, that seems to be the area of concern as it relates to the drug shortages and most of the issues that are coming down the line as it relates to dispensing and administration of prescription drugs. So majority of the products administered and dispensed are generics. However, flip side, 88% of the money that's spent is spent on brands, whether it's biologicals, biologics, specialty drugs, etc. I think a thing to note here is that even though we've seen a kind of general across the board increase in everything in terms of prices, we have seen generic drug prices fall quite significantly since 2019 by 20%. Coupling the low drug prices and the competitions within the generic drug market, that contributes to the abbreviated new drug application holders from not launching approved drugs into the market, which limits the supplies of those inexpensive generics and reduces the amount of supply that's available in the market. And since 2013, interestingly, 42% of the injectable drugs that are received that abbreviated new drug application approval actually haven't launched in the market. Some of the issues related to the shortage, in addition to the marketplace competition, is manufacturing problems. Of course, one generic manufacturer is experiencing difficulties with manufacturing, perhaps has been visited by FDA and had a 483 that indicated some concerns with manufacturing. The manufacturer, of course, needs to respond to that and modify its practices in order to comply with some of those regulatory components, make sure that the products they're producing are, of course, safe and effective for the market. So as you see manufacturers that are either entering and exiting the market, as you see regulatory oversight having an impact over the manufacturing process, that can, of course, cause fluctuation in product availability, and the supplies that are available can be reduced quite drastically. And I think too, one thing to keep in mind with within the health system specifically is that just injectable drugs by nature are very difficult to make, and for a drug manufacturer or an entity that's intending to establish a manufacturing process or facility, the cost to do that is quite significant. That one testimony I heard is that standing something up as a drug manufacturer could cost upwards to $1 billion. Next slide. Okay, a little bit more here on the FDA. I won't belabor this or read this verbatim, but you can see here a quote under the FDA frequently asked questions, which I provided a link there in the presentation for those that would like to read more about that. That the injectable drugs, some of these older sterile products, the raw materials that these firms, manufacturers are using can also become short supply. One instance, there was only one supplier of raw material for a particular product, and if that that solo supplier of the API or the active pharmaceutical ingredient for that injectable drug either allocates that product to certain manufacturers or can also request that the manufacturers dedicate or sign contracts for very long-term partnerships with these suppliers of the APIs, which further limits the ability for other manufacturers to enter into that space, as well as manufacturers have a cost-benefit analysis that form whether in signing a 6-year contract or longer with an API supplier is in the best interest of the manufacturer if they're not able to sell the product that they are that they're trying to make. So, some of these older drugs, when a manufacturer makes that decision to discontinue that, and normally that's again as a result of the cost benefit analysis determination. It's very difficult for a drug manufacturer to stand up supply and pick up that that production that no longer is existing from that exiting manufacturer. Next slide, please. This is a very interesting report on drug shortages, and it's actually quite dated back from 2018. So, but the information and the testimonies that are provided there are very interesting. And so, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the history, I encourage you to dial in there and give it a listen. But just some highlights on that report again from 2018. I think all of this still rings true today. Is that the report there identified some root causes for these drug shortages, which of course, I've already touched on some of these. And one is that lack of incentive for manufacturers to produce less profitable drugs. And so, when you're selling as a manufacturer, there's competition in the marketplace where your injectable drug is selling for, $2 a dose. And you have the opportunity to produce a different injectable drug that's going to sell for $10 a dose. You can see that it's pretty easy for a manufacturer to make that determination to switch over to producing a different drug. Of course, as that decision is made, then whatever other manufacturers left in the marketplace, the limit gets squeezed, and now that manufacturer that is continuing to supply is not able to ramp up production, perhaps doesn't have the API raw material because of contracts with other manufacturers. And so that leads to the drug shortage. I think too that the second bullet there is sub-bullet there. The market doesn't reward or incentivize manufacturers to develop mature quality systems that focus on continuous improvement and an early detection in drug supply chain shortages. So there's really not a mechanism currently in place that provides extensive insight into the drug supply chain as it relates to API production, as it relates to some of these manufacturers entering and exiting markets. And so it's difficult for the industry to understand some of the issues that would be forthcoming and be able to adjust accordingly. And as I already touched on, it's not as if these manufacturers can ramp up supply next day. That takes time to do. And so without having that insight into what's coming down the pipeline in terms of who's entering and exiting markets and contracts or API shortages and supplies from that perspective, it's really difficult for these manufacturers to become nimble. And of course, logistical and regulatory challenges can make it difficult for manufacturers to rebound and recover from supply disruption. And then, there are a limited number of major players within the drug market. And this report back again dated 2018, so these numbers may have changed since then, but 80% of the abbreviated new drug applications were held by 7% of the abbreviated new drug application sponsors. And so, most of those generic drugs are being produced by a very small percentage of manufacturers that are available to produce those drugs. And I think too, interestingly, 6% of the finished drugs are made in foreign facilities, and of that manufacturing, 90% of the base ingredients are also made at foreign facilities. So, you're dealing with a very highly concentrated generic drug market. And on average, there are 5 manufacturers supplying generic drugs to each of the drug markets around the world. As I was preparing for this discussion and for this presentation, noted that actually today there's a House Committee on Oversight and Accountability that is taking a look and looking at some of the oversight that's being done with the Food and Drug Administration. And that hearing is being held open to the public. And that's going to be live streamed today, and they will be addressing and asking Commissioner questions relative to the drug shortages that we've seen and currently see. And that actually will start today, this morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Next slide, please. Addressing this stimulant shortage here specifically, we say this, sometimes falls within the jurisdiction of DEA as well. And so I think, in addition to what we've already talked about relative to FDA, which oversees drug manufacturing, you also have a compounded component when you're talking about controlled substances. So I think, and specifically stimulant shortages, what we've seen most recently. And so again, looking at some of the whys behind what's going on with the drug market relative to stimulants, a report there by Morbidity and Mortality Weekly under the CDC, according to this report, prescriptions for stimulants were increasing for adults before COVID-19. Of course, as a result of COVID-19 and in the United States and state response to that, policies were enacted during that pandemic that increased access to prescription stimulants via telehealth. And in some of those relaxations of formal policies that would require in-person visits or the prescribing of controlled substances were relaxed. And, as a result of that, from 2020 to 2021, the percentage of females aged 15 to 44 and males aged 25 to 44 with prescription stimulant pills increased by more than 10%. So you have with stimulant, you have a significant increase in the demand, and you still have some of the same manufacturing concerns that we've just talked about relative to FDA. But in addition to that, there are some issues relative to DEA in terms of their process for allocation of controlled substance API and allocation of those manufacturers and what they're able to produce. And so I'll touch on that a little bit here as well. Next slide. So again, we saw an increase in demand. I think that demand is continuing with some of those relaxed telehealth policies, which no longer required the in-person visits. And again, I think COVID-19 and the expansion of telehealth provided access, which is great, more access to the population who are seeking mental health care through telehealth. As a result there, we saw an increased prescribing of controlled substances and most specifically here, increase in the stimulant category. Another component that challenges this shortage is you have to sat with patients who are working with one particular pharmacy that can no longer supply or has been allocated stimulant drugs by their their wholesale distributor, and those patients then seek their prescriptions elsewhere. And so, they may find a pharmacy that has a product in stock, or that the pharmacy can order the product and then the patient has their prescriptions filled there, which of course again squeezes the balloon for those established patients at that pharmacy. Then the supply for those patients are going to lower that patient seeking care elsewhere. One thing interesting here, I think we should be aware of is that while we hear a lot of issues with stimulant shortages, from my understanding, there's not necessarily a shortage from a branded product. And so, a lot of the branded Adderalls, branded Vyvanses that are shortage from the generic counterparts, there's not a significant concern with supply from the brand side of things. However, there is an issue with non-payment for branded stimulants. So, PBMs or payers are preferring generic drugs, and there's not a mechanism or a simple mechanism in place that would provide for access to those branded drugs that are available in the event of a national shortage, like we're seeing here with the generic stimulants. And so pharmacies, aren't able to provide overrides for patients, and if claims are approved, there's a significant increase in the cost share of patients, and as a result, makes those branded drugs really out of reach. And then, we touched on this already, but there's somewhat of an imbalance in the DEA allocated raw active pharmaceutical ingredients, and so manufacturers are allocated by DEA how much raw active pharmaceutical ingredient of particular controlled substance that they're able to manufacture within a given year, and that has historically been evaluated on an annual basis. We saw in 2022 and 2023 that there were some manufacturers weren't utilizing all of their allocated resources from DEA. So, you have some manufacturers that have an allocation that they're not using, and then you have some manufacturers that have not been allocated enough and are willing to manufacture more. They just simply can't because they don't have the raw ingredient. Next slide, please. Most recently, with DEA, we saw a letter to the American public to they help or we're hoping to address some of the concerns that have been circulating with regard to stimulant shortage. And so, as I mentioned, the quota process for the active pharmaceutical ingredient was previously an annual evaluation, and DEA has made that into a quarterly evaluation. So the manufacturers have now the ability to be evaluated on a quarterly basis by DEA and allocated those supplies, so those active raw pharmaceutical ingredients for their manufacturing processes, and also some of the regulation in regards to manufacturers allocated quota that they're not going to be using. They're able to relinquish that quota back to DEA for redistribution and reallotment to the manufacturers that are interested in manufacturing more. And that was back in August 2028. Some of those amendments were made. And then in November, DEA announced some additional steps to increase manufacturing transparency and receive real-time data on the status of drug production. So some of the bullets there that the DEA took, it required our manufacturers to submit anticipated production timelines in advance of receiving their quota so that the DEA can have some more transparency into manufacturers' intentions as it relates to ordering these products and producing their finalized dosage forms. I already mentioned this, that the quota application process has been changed from annually to quarterly. And there's monthly reporting requirements from manufacturers, distributors on the amount of drug product that's being produced and shipped, and then specifying whether or not those drug product allotments is coming from a domestic source, or if those allotments are coming from a being imported from another country. Next slide. But I think, from a regulatory perspective, I would be remiss for not mentioning, the opportunities that these shortages have presented in the drug supply chain for potential bad actors to set in and manipulate and capitalize on some of these shortages that we're seeing. This is a sample transaction history document that we had come across relative to the movement of some products that were in short supply. And the scheme that was taking place here, probably to a certain extent, is still taking place. We have what we're seeing are wholesale distributors that their intended business model is to reach out to the pharmacies that are allocated product in short supply by their manager, by their wholesale distributor, main wholesale distributor. And if that pharmacy, for whatever reason, doesn't use that product, these wholesale distributors will request that pharmacy purchase the product from their wholesale distributor, their main wholesale distributor, and sell the product back to this other wholesale distributor, which then reintroduces that product back into the marketplace. And so you can see here on this particular transaction history how many times that product had changed hands going through the supply chain, which again creates creates additional concern. The more transactions you have, of course, the more opportunity there is for diversion and for illicit practices to take place. So, one of the things that will help remedy some of these issues that we're seeing with bad actors in this space is the November 27, 2024 deadline of the interoperability for Drug Security Supply Chain Act. That all these transactions need to be warehoused and transmitted through an interoperable system, and so that will help facilitate some of the research that needs to be done in the event there is questionable product in the marketplace. Pharmacies and Ward's Pharmacy will be able to trace and track the pedigree, so to speak, of these products in the event there are suspect product. Of course, NMP is creating Pulse, which is an interoperable platform that will be made available to the California Board of Pharmacy as well as any other board for the purpose of investigating suspect or legitimate product. And we hope to be onboarding boards here this summer. Next slide. All right, good. And with that, I will conclude the presentation here, and I will do my best to answer any questions that the community might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Members, do you have any questions or comments? I can't see hands necessarily, so thank you. Go ahead, Dr. O.
Dr. Fung, thank you for coming. Great to see you in this capacity. Just curious, I know you touched on a lot of, I think, injectables, focusing on that challenges, which I totally understand. But what I see also is just such vast shortages of oral medications and that are not controlled oral medications, and also extremely random. And honestly, I can't put my finger to it. You probably don't have all the answers. Totally understand. But just curious if you hear anything about what is going on out there on that end. I can understand, more sterile drugs, injectable drugs. But just curious. And also, second question is, you know, in my idea of economic, and I'm not an economist. Again, I guess I play a lot of hat. I play a lawyer and an economist. I'll play an economist today. In my idea of it being in economic sense, when a product is in short supply or that there is a lack of a manufacturer of that product and there's only like one or two, I would imagine there is a price point of increase, pressure to increase, and then that would bring that person into that market so that they can alleviate the shortage. However, the price may go up. Why is that not happening? I'm not understanding. I would think that if I'm a manufacturer, I would try to just get the new product in, increase the price, which I think as the way that economics work, it would allow the market to absorb that cost increase. But that to me is not happening. Sorry for so many questions, but just whatever you can to answer my curiosity of all on this subject.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, and I think that's, it's certainly valid. And I think it's probably it's a very difficult answer. And any answer that I provide would be pure speculation, unfortunately. But as my time practicing as a pharmacist, there were instances where you would see overnight drug manufacturers exiting market, and I can think back on some of the topical creams, and I think we're seeing that today with nystatin specifically. Even back then, I recall a nystatin combination product that overnight we were paying $10 a tube, and it went to $250 a tube. And yes, I could order that product, but my reimbursement for that product was still going to be based off of the $10 a tube that I can no longer order. And so, that is one, I think, potential answer to why is that taking place. I think there's two probably. Some business operation deals that take place in terms of how the manufacturers perhaps work together to solve some of these solutions or solve some of these problems, but also while doing that can potentially create more problems as a result. So I wish I had better insights into this. I will be tuning into the hearing here that FDA commissioner will be asked probably some of these very similar questions that you're thinking, and I'm very interested in hearing the responses there on what FDA is doing as a result of this to help alleviate some of these shortages. But yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you.
Thank you, Dr. Funk. And please, I mean it when I ask this, if you do gather any additional information, please share with Anne, and you probably have my contact as well, hopefully. So just please let me know, because I'm just so curious on this issue. Just in the mystery in pharmacy, because I have never seen a shortage like this in terms of oral medications in my entire career. I've never seen it like this, and it really just boggles my mind. So would like to learn a lot more. And anyone with any information, please let us know, because just at least understanding it, I think would help us at least come to a place of some sort of, okay, that kind of makes sense. But right now, to me, it's just, I just, I'm still dumbfounded. So anyway, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Members?
Yeah, hi, this is Renee Barker. Thank you for that presentation. It is definitely a complex issue. Drug shortage, not any one solution, obviously, as you presented, many factors. I was not surprised to see your example of sodium phosphate in that drug distribution. My practice experience has been in a pediatric hospital, And we have suffered through electrolyte shortages for years, particularly that one, probably for the last 10 years off and on. And it's very critical to children. So, presents lots of difficulties when it's on shortage. And yes, we do. I know from hearing from our buyers, when there's a shortage, they get phone calls out of the blue from, wholesaler, somebody who has some, saying we can sell it to you, and the price is exorbitant. And and it just doesn't seem like somebody like such a free market commodity. I don't know. It just is just not right. So I really appreciate that NABP has put together this information, and also, glad to hear I'd seen the information FDA, really taking a look at this, but there's so many complex issues. And I would say that the one that I would like to see FDA do more of is, at least in the category of quality issues, where they're just shut down because they're not, they're not doing what they say they do, and they're not doing what they are supposed to do under GMP,
Yeah.
right? And then, just some of the basic, I say basic, but like sterile compounding type requirements. But maybe, from your presentation, I don't know that you have to be incentivized to follow the regulations, but just something. Hopefully the FDA can encourage them more, at least in that. I think the others, raw material shortages and natural disasters, those things are challenging. But anyway, thank you so much for the presentation. Appreciate it.
Any other comments?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Dr. Funk, for the presentation. I just had a question about, so your presentation talked about the causes and like where we should be focusing in terms of these shortages, and it was all placed very squarely with the manufacturers. But of course, the drug manufacturers have a lot of money and lobbying power, so they are creating a lot of narratives that is pushing this blame back to pharmacies. I've heard it being put on the 340B drug discount program. I've recently heard of legislation that's going that could potentially impact hospitals and them having to have practices around this. So do you have any recommendations, and or does NABP do any, like, maybe not lobbying, but trying to, how do we keep the focus on the manufacturers and not let them create the narrative that this is because of pharmacies or, because of hospital practices, things like that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. I wanted to mention during my presentation specifically sort of what NABP has been doing or is planning to do. We, the way that NABP operates in terms of policy formation and looking at issues more closely is we look to our districts to decide what particular issues we need to be either investigating or gathering more information on. And so in last fall, the District 1, which is comprised of many of the states in the northeast part of the country, submitted a resolution to NABP for consideration that would direct NABP to look at this issue more specifically and to work with FDA, manufacturers, and other groups to come up with solutions and evaluate what's going on with this drug shortage. Originally, we were, the issue at the time were the stimulants. The resolution was modified to be more general, and so if more work will be done on this issue. It's a matter of moving this resolution forward through the NABP process, which will be a resolution committee, and then determining what that committee decides, presenting that then to the full membership in May at our annual meeting. And so, more work to be done here by AVP on this particular issue. And so I think more to come.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. As a public agency for the board, we are required to accept public comment on each agenda item, including presentation. Public comment is not intended as a question and answer session, but rather provides members of the public an opportunity to comment on the information provided in the presentation. Dr. Funk, you are welcome to answer a question, but if you choose, you're no obligation to do so. So we're going to go to members of the public. Are there any public comments in Sacramento?
No public comments, thank you.
Great, we're ready for public comment via WebEx.
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to start with Monty Godard, and next we'll hear from Pat Irving. Hold on just a second, Monty. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 10-second warning.
Everybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Great. My name is Monty Goddard. I'm a California licensed civil engineer and a pain patient advocate. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. It was a good briefing. I enjoyed it. I comment on another very real contributor to the all too real shortages of FDA-approved pain medications. For some time, I've been very aware of the negative impact of the DEA's ever-shrinking controlled substance production quotas on the supply to pharmacies of FDA-approved medications. But over a year ago, I became aware of another new significant negative impact on the controlled substances supply chain. This latest harm being the 41 state attorney generals' nationwide settlement with the 3 major distributors or wholesalers of controlled substances, McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health. Specifically, it's injunctive relief. After carefully reading all 54 pages of this settlement's injunctive relief, which is labeled Exhibit P, I knew this settlement would have a significant negative impact on the supply of controlled substances to pharmacy shelves. I have collected a myriad of evidence proving I was correct. I contend this settlement's injunctive relief, with its mandated thresholds, which the distributors must establish and keep secret from the pharmacies they supply, red flags, onboarding, terminated customers ad infinitum, are resulting in insufficient supplies to pharmacies of existing, already manufactured controlled substances, not just opioids. The injunctive relief is very onerous and intimidating, I believe by design. The entire supply chain is rightfully afraid and therefore being overly cautious and restricting. A related concern is a glaring disconnect between the ASHP's and the FDA's acknowledgement of or recognition of the ongoing shortages of pain medications. Please recommend to the full board they engage both of these components, contributing to the ongoing controlled substances shortages. Patients' lives depend on it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Pat Irving, followed by Lucas Evanson. Hold on, Pat. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Great. Again, I would like to also comment on a similar topic to what Monty just said. And this, maybe Dr. Funk, if you choose to, you might choose to weigh in on. one of the related factors is that the FDA measures things very differently than the American Society of Health System Pharmacists. And that in itself is causing a huge problem for pain patients. Let me explain. So the FDA is measuring manufacturing shortages, and currently hydrocodone and oxycodone are not on that list. However, ASHP is more, I think correctly, measuring the shortages that happen at the counter for the pharmacist and for the patient. And ASHP says, yes, there is a shortage of hydrocodone and oxycodone. Dr. Funk, is there a way to encourage the FDA to measure both metrics, not just the one metric, to bring things in line with, for lack of a better word, the reality that consumers face? What do consumers see? They don't see manufacturing shortages. They see what ASHP says. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And next, we're going to hear from Lucas Evanson. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. Yes, go ahead, please.
Great. Hello, my name is Lucas Evanson, speaking on behalf of the California Medical Association. We'd like to thank the board and its staff for taking up this important issue and NABP for this presentation. CMA continues to hear concerns and frustration from physicians about their patients having trouble accessing their prescription medications. This can have significant impacts on patient care. We understand the board may not have the jurisdiction to address all the reasons a patient may not be able to access their prescription medications, but appreciate hearing that the board will continue to explore some of these reasons in future meetings. CMA looks forward to working with the board to help improve patient access to prescription medications in whatever ways it can. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're going to make one last check. Those were all of our requests for public comment.
Thank you. As you can tell, that this is a huge issue to our community, both public and professional. Sadly, this continues to be an ongoing problem. I've been involved with drug shortages and managing drug shortages for almost 2 decades, and it's sad that this is continuing. I look back, and I was interviewed by the San Francisco Chronicle back in 2012 regarding drug shortages, and it has not improved, and in fact has gotten worse in including other parts of our pharmacy practice. Drug shortages have impacted the practice of pharmacy, but much worse is it's impacted patients. So thank you for your presentation. Members, do you have any final thoughts for Dr. Funk? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Funk, for your presentation and for your time.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Great, let's move on to the next agenda item, number 5. Discussion and consideration of proposed changes to ADDS self-assessment rulemaking and form as requested by the Office of Administrative Law. Members, as included in the meeting materials, California Code of Regulations Title 16, Section 1715.1 establishes the requirement for the pharmacist in charge of each automated drug delivery system, also referred to as ADDS, to complete a self-assessment form evaluating the pharmacy's compliance with state and federal law. The self-assessment form is incorporated by reference in the section. As such, when updates to the forms are required to reflect changes in law, the board must undertake rulemaking process. The meeting materials include additional details, so I'll keep my comments short regarding the background information, but we'll note that in the January 2022 board meeting, the board voted to initiate rulemaking to update the self-assessment form. At the end of the rulemaking process, the Office of Administrative Law, or OAL, identified issues with the form that could not be resolved within the limited time frame provided. As such, the rulemaking was withdrawn. For our consideration today is an updated version of the self-assessment form that includes the previous changes that we approved as the board and includes additional changes as required by OAL with that are minor in nature, reflecting the changes in pharmacy and a few, excuse me, I'll just say that again because it's very clear, has to be very clear. The changes that we're looking at today include the previous changes by the board, a few minor changes to the law that have occurred since then, and in addition, changes as required by OAL. The meeting materials generally detail out the changes, and I will not spend time reviewing them in any great detail. While the form appears to indicate a significant number of changes, I want to reiterate that most of these changes were previously approved by the board. To demonstrate what is something that is new that we have not previously seen was an example that was changed by OAL on the first page, and that is in the note for hospital pharmacies. The prior version of the board referenced operating a ADDS pursuant to BPC 4427.2. At the request of OAL, ADDS has been replaced throughout the document as AUDS. Members, I reviewed the changes and believe that the self-assessment form as presented is appropriate. I welcome your comments on the draft language and the self-assessment form. Note that the meeting materials and the meeting slide include, the next slide, include a possible motion if you believe such action is appropriate. Members, any comments?
Hi, Chair Serpa. This is Nicole. I just had a few quick comments. First, I wanted to say thank you for switching to non-gendered language. I noticed that we changed everything that said he or she to they. So that's appreciated. The only particular comment I had about the self-assessment is maybe more of a question. On the header for section 6, it says ADDS in a health facility pursuant to HSC 1250, and then it is crossed out long-term care facilities. I'm just wondering why are we removing that? I feel like that is helpful to have, that people can kind of scan through and see that that's the section that they're looking for. So I wasn't really understanding why we need to remove the term long-term care facilities, because in other sections we do use the descriptive term. I'm not sure if anyone can answer that for me.
That's a very good question. Is there somebody from the staff that can answer it? I know that we sometimes get into challenges trying to describe the specific language. And so, when you look at this, when it says below that, it says for purposes of the section, facility pursuant to section 1250. And there may be additional things in there that's not just as simple as saying long-term care facilities. And we get stuck sometimes when the summary statement does not necessarily match what's in the detail of the regulation. But is there somebody, Anne, or somebody that can respond to that? Is that the reason why we took that out?
Thank you. I think I'll defer to Jennifer, the board's regulation counsel.
Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us.
Thank you. I'm looking to see if I can get that information.
Sure. So I guess we could just take my comment back, and if there's a reason that it has to be changed, I'm okay with that. But if it's possible to leave it in, I think it's a little more clear or easier to find the section. Like if you're looking for the part that's relevant to your facility, I think it's helpful to have those titles. So that, but I can live with it either way.
So we'll just take that, Jennifer, as a future discussion. But I know that we've talked about that because I was involved when we added these titles back many years ago, trying to help with this very complex form. So I know there was a reason to take it out, but I don't think Jennifer was involved with when we took it out. I think she's come to the party since then. So
yes, thank you.
Okay with that, we'll just move on.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other member comments? I'm open for a motion.
Make a motion to recommend initiation of a rulemaking to amend California Code of Regulation Title 16, Section 1715.1. Consistent with the committee's discussion, since Nicole's comment is there, I'm going to say that. And self-assessment form 17M-112 incorporated by reference authorize the executive officer to furnish refined language consistent with the committee's discussion and OAL's recommendations, and to make any non-substantive changes prior to presenting the proposed rulemaking to the board.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Nicole. I'll second.
Thank you. With a motion and second, I think we're ready for public comments. Are there any public comment in Sacramento?
Oh, thank you.
Great. So we're ready for public comment via WebEx.
We have a motion and a second on agenda item 5. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And it looks like in the Q&A box we have Keith Yoshizuka. Hold on, Keith. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Of health system pharmacists. In the interest of transparency, I'm requesting that the comments made by the Office of Administrative Law that prompted the changes be made public, just so that we can be better educated as to how to word things in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Yoshizuka. Jennifer, do you have any comments about that?
Yes, I received an email from OAL this morning that the comments from OAL can be released.
Great, thank you.
All right, next we're going to hear from Stephen Gray. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you for the opportunity again. I offer just as a possible explanation as to why the OAL perhaps was the one that wanted long-term care left out. If you look at section 1250 of the Health and Safety Code, section 1250 refers to a lot of different facilities by different names. And I don't see anyone that says long-term care. So they're probably trying to, is the board trying to say that that section 2.3 only applies to quote long-term care, or does it apply to all of the facilities that are listed in section 1250 of the Health and Safety Code, which is correctional treatment centers, psychiatric hospitals, many other skilled nursing facilities, and many other types besides general acute care hospitals. And again, I think it's a lack of specificity or the selection of a term that is not even used in 1250. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was our last request for public comment.
Great, thank you. Members, do you have any additional comments before we move on to the vote? Okay, seeing none, the motion was as presented on the previous screen. Renee Barker.
Yes.
Indira Cameron Banks.
Yes.
Sung Oh.
Yes.
Nicole Tebow.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, motion passes. Next item is number 6, discussion on compounding activities by IV hydration clinics. Members, the meeting materials include relevant sections of federal law that establish conditions in which compounded human drug products are exempt from 3 sections of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The meeting materials also provide some background information on the issue of hydration, IV hydration clinics, including information about warnings released by the FDA involving instances of drug products being compounded under unsanitary conditions. The materials highlight that many of the warnings stem from compoundings occurring in sites that are not regulated by the board, including IV hydration clinics. IV hydration clinics appear to be operating in a number of settings, including beauty salons, mobile vans, and gymnasiums, and appeared to lack oversight when appear to lack appropriate oversight when used with and use of appropriate equipment and with improper storage and placing patients at risk. We also see examples of this practice in the media and advertising offering IV hydration in the workplace, in the home, and in hotels. These issues are occurring across the nation, including California. Board staff have observed inspections in some IV hydration clinics and report witnessing alarming practices placing consumers at risk. Staff also report challenges with conducting such investigations because even basic patient information, administration information, etc., is not maintained nor provided to the board. Given the risk to patients and the documented harm, this issue is brought here before the committee to consider and determine if there are any actions the board should take to protect patients. Members, there are quite a few policy questions that are included in the meeting materials. Unless you have any general questions, let's begin with those questions. Are we ready to begin? Okay. First for consideration is, does the committee believe that the board should have a role in regulation of IV hydration clinics? I believe the regulation of these clinics is necessary, and the board has subject matter expertise with inspectors such that I believe that we are well suited to perform an oversight role. I do believe that we would have an impact, this would have an impact on our staff, and I don't think we could absorb such a regulation with our existing resources. Members, what are your thoughts?
I just jump in, Chair Sherpa?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. Yes, absolutely. They're understanding the resource challenges. I think that unfortunately, public may not be aware how risky this could be and how dangerous this could be. It sounds so innocent, and sometimes we don't realize how dangerous these things that happens out there. So I think there is, at least, if anything, opportunity for education. But if there is an opportunity to actually possibly regulate these entities, I would imagine that this would have to definitely go to legislator and part of a sunset issue that we could raise. But it would, be a challenge, but I think we should pursue.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Renee. I just wanted to add, I would also agree with both of your comments. I mean, the magnitude of something like this, I think that's definitely, something that would not be able to be accommodated quickly. However, I think the combination of compounding along with consumer protection for basically prescription drugs definitely would fall under, pharmacy. So in terms of oversight, and then also, of course, with the expertise for the for compounding. So I would say yes also.
Thank you. We can move on. Okay. The next question relates to the board's current cease and desist authority under BP Code 4316. With this authority, the board can issue a cease and desist if it obtains information during an inspection that causes reasonable belief that the compounded sterile drug products create an immediate threat to public health and safety. Does the committee believe that the board should have the authority to issue a cease and desist order if it identifies an immediate threat to public health and safety in these unregulated clinics? This would be similar to what the board does when it finds an unlicensed pharmacy. I believe the board needs to have a role in protecting consumers, especially since there are no other state regulators in this space that are evaluating the practice or compliance. Members, what are your thoughts?
I'm gonna speak up. First, again, Anne and Corinne, please don't kill me, but I just think there's also possible opportunities, as I would imagine that these businesses are driven by a lot of profit motives. I don't think that they genuinely want to hydrate people from the bottom of their heart. I mean, they probably do. I think there's a lot of money involved. So I think if I'm remembering correctly, there is a possibility of us finding unlicensed activities. Maybe a little bit of a challenge. I don't know legally if that's a possibility, but I just like to throw out there that if there is an opportunity to also cease and desist, yes, that's the question that's being asked, but also maybe look for potential fine authority or fine of these entities that are non-licensed. Now, will we get the money? I don't know, but at least now we have fine authority, I believe, per instances. So hoping that that can also be considered by our staff. If there is a legal possible ways to do so, then I would also encourage us to start doing that.
Thank you.
President O, this is Corinne. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify just to make sure that the board members understand. So the question that was so there's two separate sections of the Business and Professions Code that, give cease and desist, existing cease and desist authority. One of them is BPC 4127.3. That one relates specifically to pharmacies compounding sterile drug products. So I think the question there was, we've got this existing authority, but it only applies to pharmacies. So does there need to be, an exploration of expanding that cease and desist authority to these other types of facilities? The second question, and that's the next one on the agenda, has to do with BPC section 4316. And that is, I think, is the one, President O, you were referring to about the cease and desist authority for unlicensed practice. The board could consider exercising that existing authority in this context of these unlicensed facilities. As far as the fine authority, that's not something I have off the top of my head, so I'd have to look into that unless maybe Anne knows it off the top of her.
Yeah, I do think that the law was recently changed then under 1286, and the board can issue a fine of up to $5,000 per occurrence for unlicensed activity.
Oh.
Yeah, I think the question will become similar to the internet violations that the board issued, I don't know, a decade ago, those really high fines that were never collected upon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Any other comments from members?
Hi, Maria. Maria, it's Renee. Yeah, I think in the interest of patient safety, I mean, somebody who's an immediate threat, I mean, I would imagine these may come as some type of report from somebody, and even possibly with the FDA. But in order to avoid any catastrophe, I mean, you would want to be able to do a cease and desist. So in terms of the legality, I'm not sure, but otherwise, there's no way to protect the public then, if we can't.
Okay, let's move on to the next question for our consideration. Does the committee believe the board has the authority if the committee believes that we have the authority, should the board exercise this authority and issue cease and desist orders for unlicensed practices? So we kind of fell into this question a little bit earlier too, but I believe that this would be an appropriate tool for us to consider, but we would need to be very specific as to the facts of the situation and understand the total situation of the practice in determining whether we have a cease and desist. Very similar to what we do with unlicensed pharmacies. Members, do you have any additional comments on that part of the question?
Hi Maria, it's Nicole. I'm struggling with this whole issue a little bit, and I'll explain why. Is that so a lot of patients who have like dysautonomia conditions use these IV hydration clinics, including people that have POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, which there is a huge increase of due to long COVID. And for like these conditions are extremely debilitating, and getting IV fluids can be one of the best treatments. But you can't always, because there's a lot of lack of knowledge around POTS and dysautonomia and some of these conditions in the medical community. And since, you know, there's this new outbreak, I think a lot of patients are relying on these IV hydration clinics to get these IV fluids when maybe they don't have a doctor who really understands the condition yet and they don't have access. So yes, I think for public safety, we absolutely have to do something, and do a cease and desist makes sense. But I also think that we have to create a mechanism for these clinics to continue to exist, or for something to exist, as opposed to just shut everything down and then possibly leave, because we could be creating another problem. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I totally get the safety issue, but if we then take away the only treatment for all of these like new long COVID patients, are we doing harm when we're trying to do good? So I'm struggling with this whole issue overall, but think we have to create like a mechanism for them to get licensed, for them to get in compliance, if we're going to be regulating them, as opposed to just shut absolutely everything down and then leave this big gap of time where there may not be any options for these patients. Maybe we need more information for what patients are using these clinics or something, but that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, thank you. I think we all agree that IV hydration has its appropriate place, but it is really scary what's going on out there, and patients have been harmed by, as Dr. O was talking about, money-making businesses that really don't have, we're going to talk about in the future questions, but don't have safe products, and they don't have a safe way of compounding the products, and let alone how are they administering them. It's like the Wild West out there, but there is a place for IV hydration. We just need to make sure that it's safe. So I appreciate your comments to keep us on the right path. Members, any other comments before we move on to the next question? The next question, number 4. The board currently does not have the authority to request records from these facilities to investigate the source of drug products. And so this is about where the drug products are coming from. Do we as a committee believe that the board should explore securing authority to request and review such records? I believe the answer is yes, and could be mirrored in a similar fashion to the requirements for pharmacies to provide information to medical board inspectors, for example. Members, what are your comments? I think to me, this was one of the areas that I found, not the only area, but one of the areas I found very concerning is where are these products coming from? And we all know that underground drugs are a part of what's happening in our communities and in our society, and pharmacies really try to avoid gray market type of things, but I don't think IV hydration clinics do. I think that we don't know where their products are coming from. Number 5, Does the committee believe that changes in the law may be necessary to require pharmacies and wholesalers selling supplies, ingredients, or products to such businesses such as IV hydration clinics must exercise due diligence prior to selling to such businesses? Again, I believe the answer is yes. And this may be a good article for an issue of the script, as some wholesalers and pharmacies may be unwittingly selling to such businesses. BPC code 4126.5 already identifies who a pharmacy may furnish drugs to, and so failure to, on the part of the pharmacy, to confirm who they're selling the drug to that they're authorized is consistent with the law. Members, any questions or comments?
So on this one, Maria, in general, as I said before, I'm in support of it, but I get a little bit concerned with this because I think it really can be a little difficult for pharmacies or wholesalers to vet, because I mean, I think it's really easy to pretend to be a legitimate buyer with a prescriber name or signature. Like, I'm not sure how much or how far would we expect them to do their vetting on these, I would imagine these are non-controlled substances. So this question, I would just ask to tread very lightly and carefully and consider a lot of mitigation and be cautious of punishing the seller of these products when the ultimate culprit is, to me, these businesses that are really trying to manipulate the market, possibly. And again, there's just wanting to voice a total appreciation for Nicole's comment, the need for some of these clinics and the benefit that people can get. But I think that obviously we just have to have a total understanding of the circumstances of these businesses and what they serve. But I just think pharmacies and wholesalers, I just want to make sure that they are not kind of feeling like they're unjustifiably targeted, because they do serve patients already legitimately in many lines of the products they make.
Mhm. I do agree with that, and that's why we're starting with education, and that we need to make sure that the pharmacies and wholesalers are totally aware of their responsibility. But this is an ongoing issue we have already, not just with IV clinics. And so these, especially the wholesalers and the larger pharmacies, already have processes to vet and to confirm where they're sending medications to. As a person who's tried to engage a new wholesaler or a new manufacturer, I have to send lots of forms in with, my pharmacy license, and those things are all vetted. It's not something that's done over the phone or via a fax kind of, approval kind of system. So these are systems that wholesalers already have, and I would hope that most pharmacies have. If they get a doctor's office calling them saying that they want some medications for their office practice, that they vet that and not just send it off to, some PO box somewhere. But I agree that they are not the cause of the issue. And so as time goes on and as education becomes more aware, people are more aware, then I think that we need to be more strict on this too, because really these are the gatekeepers to protect our patients and our community. The manufacturers, the wholesalers, and the pharmacies were there to make sure that things don't get out to unintended locations. Members, any other comments on wholesalers and pharmacies supplying products? Okay, the last couple of questions. Number 6, does the committee believe that the board should release a policy statement encouraging compliance with federal law and compliance with USP? Kind of going back to what I just recently talked about. I'm a strong advocate of education, and I believe that the board has a role to promote safe compounding practices. If members agree, I would be happy to work with staff on developing a statement for our consideration at the July board meeting. Go ahead, Sung.
I was just giving thumbs up.
Okay. And
I keep
so we'll work
talking
on
a lot, so I just try not to talk so much.
That's perfectly fine.
This is Renee. I just wanted to, so if the board released a policy statement encouraging compliance with, the federal law and USP, but where would it be sent? So in other words, these are like, I don't know where would this be seen by those who are doing this, right? I mean, from, like true, I say true, well, just, some of the IV hydration clinics, regardless of, whether it's therapeutic or med spa or, in a gymnasium, like who's really going to read this? And then like what type of language would, well, I mean, that would be something to be considered, but be understood. When you kind of have federal law and you kind of throw out some USP document numbers. I'm not sure. Anyway, I think that would have to be taken into consideration in terms of understandability, but also just where would it go to try to get to the end result that we're hoping for?
That's a good question. I think what I pictured this would be the first step as a normal policy statement that the board has that would go out to licensees, and then it would also go out as a part of our policy statement that would be available to media. I don't know if you've read articles, but there are media articles about these IV hydration clinics, especially when there have been negative outcomes. And so the board would be able to provide comment based on our policy statement to media outlets as they investigate issues too. But this first part would be going to licensees and like our policy statement that we have on our website. Anne, anything else to add on that?
I think that's great. I think the other thing that we could also do is perhaps share with our sister agencies and the various programs within DCA, Board of Barbering and Cosmetology, and some of those others where we're seeing maybe some of this business model popping up perhaps in areas for which they regulate.
That's good. Thank you. And the last question really gets to, I think, what Renee was talking about too, and I thought was really important for us to reach out beyond our licensees is, does the committee believe the board should release a policy statement to the public warning of the dangers of receiving IV products and preparations from unlicensed facilities and unlicensed personnel? I believe this is appropriate and consistent with our consumer protection mandate. And if there is agreement, I think that a policy statement could be probably developed within the Communications and Public Education Committee, who provide education to the public. Members, what do you think about this step in reaching out to members of the public?
Hi, Maria. It's Nicole. I do think we should reach out to the members of the public. I think where I'm not sure how exactly we can do it, but I imagine that this will just kind of say, it's dangerous, don't go there, but can we provide any tools for the public to help them, know, like direct them elsewhere, like tell them where it is safe to get these sort of things, like look for a licensed phlebotomist, look for, if there's anything we can provide them, because we know some people are still going to do it. If we just say, don't do it, it's not safe. Like, is there any tools we can give them to kind of be like, in a doctor's office, this is safe, at a, do you know what I'm saying? Like, that if we can give them some tools where they can kind of use judgment, because we know some people are still going to do it. So I would love to see if there's a way that we can kind of walk that line.
Yeah, that would be good to provide some information. I think we might be walking that line, as you say, because we can't really say, but in these unlicensed locations, it's okay. So we have to, kind of provide that they understand the importance of IV hydration and how to obtain it, and until we potentially regulate the area. The board will have to decide whether they're going to regulate this area or not.
Yeah, sorry, not referring them probably to anywhere that's unlicensed, but kind of giving them directions, like you can speak to your medical provider, this falls under the realm of like medical treatment. So we would recommend that you know, speak to your provider, go to urgent care, like whatever it is that like directs them more towards a licensed facility. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
No, that sounds really good. Thank you. Members, any other comments before we go to the public comment?
This is Renee. I think as far as the statement, I completely agree with Nicole to, you know, try and direct people and realize the difficulty of it. But I would also say that, you know, even there's the FDA statement that went out, which was actually fall of 2021, which just is, you know, the title, and this is basically the article. FDA highlights concerns with compounding of drug products by medical offices and clinics under insanitary conditions. And they go on to list why, and they give some examples, including a California patient, you know, because the FDA stepped in, right? They'll come and look at 503A, and yeah, so and then they, you know, go on to say that the states, hoping for the states to get engagement on this. And so that type of statement, I still think is important, because I think people don't, you know, like, I think somebody might need to be motivated to go look, like maybe possibly realize that maybe where they're at doesn't seem like they will, you know, seem like they will get a quality sterile product, and motivate them to go look for one. And not trying to do any scare tactics, but they're like, these are documented factual occurrences, and listing what, you know, that there are definitely well-defined requirements for preparation. And this people, I mean, they just don't know. I mean, should they know? You know, there's just some things you just can't know everything about the world, but you know, this something that if they're doing it, they should be a little more informed. So I do think it should, you know, kind of call that out also, probably, you know, in similar fashion to the FDA notice.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we've finished our discussion as members of the board, so we're ready to go to the public comment. Are there any public comment in Sacramento? Let us know if you find a public comment in Sacramento, but we'll go to WebEx. Moderator?
We are open for public comment via WebEx on agenda item 6. If you'd like to make a comment, raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. As a reminder to our mobile device users, please hit the ... if you're having trouble finding your hand button, the ellipses button. And we're first going to hear from Stacy Neroni. Hold on, Stacy. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate, I did make this comment on yesterday's board meeting, that I urge the board to consider other situations as well that will be affected by whatever you decide to do. It's not just hydration centers that have this issue. There are cancer infusion clinics, other types of providers that are also unlicensed that may or may not be doing compounding and for infusion, and whatever you do for the infusion clinics may also apply to these other clinics that I strongly believe the rules are not clear currently as to whether or not they require a license, they're eligible for a license, and how to get a license. So any guidance that you can provide on how they should remain compliant, although I understand there's physicians and it's easier for them to acquire the meds, there are still situations where they may not be compounding appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Stephen Gray. Bear with us just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you again. This is related to what I suggested for a future agenda. I think it's very important to emphasize that these hydration centers are basically using electrolytes and other prescription drugs to accomplish the hydration. This makes all of the therapy have to be ordered by a practitioner who is legally able to prescribe. And in many cases, with a legitimate patient prescriber relationship that by both federal and state law. In many cases, this is not happening. Yesterday at the licensing committee meeting, it was concluded, the way I understood, that the board clearly has the authority under 4008 to inspect any location where prescription drugs and devices are located and determine and that's explicit in the statute. And so the board could go in there and find out where they're getting these from. My understanding is that some of them are coming from California licensed wholesalers and non-resident licensed wholesalers, but some of them are coming from out-of-state wholesalers and offices of other hydration centers, for an example, in Las Vegas, that are just getting the IV solutions and drugs there and just shipping them to their offices in California. The other thing to keep in mind that you can go to the internet and you can just Google hydration therapy in California, is a license needed? You can ask, and all of the compliance organizations that I identified said yes, they need a license as a clinic, or they need to be operating under the license of a physician or other licensee that is allowed to buy prescription drugs. Nurse practitioners, physicians, assistants are not allowed under 4059 and 4059.2 to even buy prescription IVs, drugs, or dangerous devices such as IV sets and solution and needles. So the board has clearly that ability to go in and inspect and find out. I have experience of in a prior life that the board gave a cease and desist to a big wholesaler because they were delivering to unlicensed entities. And they said, not only does the have to be ordered by a properly licensed entity, physician, clinic, hospital, etc., but it has to be delivered to that entity's address of license, the physician's office license, and it has to be stored under the physician's responsibility, and payment has to come in the name of the physician to the wholesaler. And they issued AmerisourceBergen with a cease and
10 seconds.
Service with a cease and desist order and threatened their whole wholesale license, and the practice stopped immediately. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was our last request for public comment.
Thank you. Members, any additional comments? If no additional comments, I will work with staff on the next steps and bring the issue back to our committee at our July meeting. Members, we have been discussing for almost 2 hours, but I think we have a very short time left on the agenda, but I wanted to see if anybody wanted to take a break, or should we push on?
I'm sorry, Chair Sir, but I could really use a break.
Okay, no problem. Let's take a 15-minute break and we'll come back a little bit less than 15. Can we come back at 11?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I need to take a 15-minute break so we'll come back at 11:05. Thank you. Okay, it's 11:05. I think I'll take a quick roll call to see if everyone's back. Renee Barker.
I'm here.
Oh, thanks, Renee.
Yeah.
Indira Cameron Banks.
Present.
Thank you. Sung Oh.
I'm here.
And Nicole Tebow.
Here, thank you.
Great, we're all back. Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 7, discussion and consideration of updates to frequently asked questions related to Assembly Bill 1286. Members, as you may recall, as a part of our discussion on the implementation of Assembly Bill 1286, given the comprehensive nature of the measure, we determined that development of frequently asked questions was appropriate. The FAQs were considered during the February board meeting. The board approved the FAQs at that time, but suggested a few additional items for consideration related to minimum staffing levels may be appropriate. Since our meeting, the board's publication, The Script, has also released a special edition on AB 1286 to provide more background and information to licensees. For today's meeting, attachment 3 includes a copy of the updated FAQs for our consideration. The proposed changes are in questions number 8 and 9 and are reflected in the underlined text. Members, I've reviewed and believe the proposed changes are appropriate. I welcome your thoughts and would entertain a motion to recommend approval of the additional FAQs if you believe such action is appropriate. Members, do you have any comments or questions?
This is Nicole. I'll motion to recommend approval of the additional FAQs related to Assembly Bill 1286.
Great, thank you.
This is Renee. I'll second that.
Great, thank you. With a motion and second on the floor, I'll open the discussion for public comment to the proposed changes to the FAQs. Any comment in Sacramento? Okay, let's go on to public comment on WebEx.
We are open for public comment via WebEx on agenda item 7. If you'd like to make a comment, raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of your screen. Dial in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. As a reminder, we have the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner. If you're having trouble finding the hand button, you can type the word comment. We're going to take just a couple more seconds before we continue. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Please do, thank you. It probably didn't come through. I was showing the copy of the script. Hopefully all of you have seen it come through with the special edition on AB 1286. We have a motion on the floor and I think we're ready for the vote. Renee Barker.
Yes.
Indira Cameron Banks.
Yes.
Sung Oh.
Yes.
Nicole Tebow.
Yes.
The chair votes yes, motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item 8, review and discussion of enforcement statistics. Members, the meeting materials include a summary of enforcement statistics for the first 8 months of the fiscal year. The board has received 2208 complaints and closed 1,798 investigations. As of March 1st, 2024, the board has 1,662 field investigations pending. The materials provide a breakdown of the average time frame for the various stages of the field investigations. I did note that the average time for cases pending supervisory review has increased significantly, and I'd like to ask staff to keep me apprised of the progress made to reduce that time period for such a review in the coming months. Members, what are your thoughts on the enforcement statistics? Do you have any thoughts? Seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Any comment in Sacramento?
None, thank you.
Okay, we're ready for comment via WebEx.
We are open for comment via WebEx for agenda item 8. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users dial *3 to raise a hand. We will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue?
Yes, thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 11, future meeting dates and adjournment. Before we adjourn today, I'd like to thank everyone for their time and participation. Our next meeting is scheduled for July 17th, 2024. Please monitor the board's website for updates. And for those of you that will be at Ledge Ridge this afternoon, I'll see you this afternoon. Thank you and have a nice day. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.